Good morning, everyone. Happy to see you all in person. We've had a couple of sessions over the last couple of quarters, and we've been able to join each other online, but it's such a different feeling to be in the room together and to be able to exchange ideas and provide solutions to challenges. We're really excited about the way forward, and I truly believe that together we can solve many challenges and address many concerns when we're able to have an open forum and talk about these concerns. Colonel Varner and I worked together on this vendor session a few years ago, and when she told me she was coming back, she said, look, we got to get that going again. And we're really excited about where we started with being able to do it online and where we are today with it quarterly. As chair of ABCK, one of the questions I get asked most is, how can you do business with the U.S. military? And it's like, hey, we have a session that will answer all your questions. But there's a lot of hard work that comes with that. A lot of follow-up, a lot of attention to detail. And you have the opportunity to talk to all the subject matter experts that will be speaking today. I don't want to take a lot of time because you didn't come here to see me. So I just want to give out a couple of admin points and say some thank yous to our military partners for being here today, and all of you that are coming. I always need to recognize our board members, our chairman's club, our champions that do a lot of the work to support the organization. My ED Paola and her team, they put all these things together, and without them, we wouldn't be able to be as successful. So as we move forward, we're going to have two sessions, a morning session, afternoon session. Everybody should have registered appropriately. There'll be a couple of breaks. Try to hold your questions to the appropriate time. And we just want to have a great day. And feel free to ask any board member a question anytime you need it. And join us on social media. Follow us for other events. Our season is coming to an end, but we have a few more events before the summer starts. So pay attention to our social media and get involved. So without going on much more, I'd like to turn it over to the 386 Econ. Thank you all. Let's have a good day.
Good morning. Assalamu alaikum. I'm Captain Andrew Ingerson. I'm the Director of Business Operations for the 386th Expeditionary Contracting Squadron. And today, the purpose of our presentation is to give a brief overview on how our unit solicits for contracting support and to provide some tips on how you can submit an effective proposal or quote. Here we go. So first, I'm going to start off by giving you just a brief overview on how our unit is organized, and then I'm going to pass it on to a member from each of our flights to go into their specifics. And please hold your questions to the end. So the 386 Econs is a small Air Force contracting unit. We're made up of about 14 members. We're located at Ali Al Salim Air Base here in Kuwait. We support the 386th Air Expeditionary Wing, and also we support missions at Ahmad Al Jaber Air Base and also Al Mubarak Air Base, also known as Cargo City. Our unit is composed of three main flights. We have a government purchase card flight, also known as the GPC flight. They handle all actions that are at $35,000 USD or below. We have our infrastructure flight, which handles construction projects. And we also have our base operating support and services flight, also known as the BOSS flight. They handle all of our commodities and services at the base. And with that, I'll pass it on to GPC. click on the arrow.
Gotcha, okay. All right, well, good morning, everyone. I'm Senior Master Sergeant Sweeter. I'm the GPC Flight Chief with Captain Ingerson out at the 386. And this morning I'll talk a little bit about what the GPC program is. Just a quick show of hands, who is not familiar with the GPC program or the Government Purchase Card program is? Okay, a few. So this will give you just a brief overview. Again, if you have questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them at the end of our presentation. So the GPC card, it's the Government Purchase Card, it's a streamlined way that the government goes and procures and buys the supplies and services that we need. It provides on-the-spot purchasing, so that means when we go out and we make a purchase, we can pay you right there on the spot, either from your business or sometimes we'll meet you at our, what we call the Kuwaiti Sand Pit. It's an area that we meet vendors, get the things that we need, make payment on the spot. As Captain Ingerson said, it's for items, services, and supplies under $35,000, and the purchase limit for construction is $2,000, so that's something to keep in mind. The conversion rate typically, I know this is a little bit dated, but it's about 9,800 KD, and again, it does fluctuate with the bank rate. So right now, I have 2 cardholders with me. Some of you might have done business with us before. I got Staff Sergeant Bordalo, Senior Airman Ortega, and typically our flight, depending on the rotation, is between 2 and 3, depending on what time of year it is and who's out here with us. So these are the things that we typically buy. Again, this isn't an all-inclusive list, but keep this in mind. Lately, we bought a lot of furniture. We've been buying a lot of office supplies and a lot of the civil engineering construction projects. We've been buying a lot of stuff for that. And again, it varies depending on what we need for that week or that mission or that requirement. I like to say we do on-demand purchasing. So when we have a requirement come in, we may not know what it is. We have no real way of forecasting that. So we take care of what we can. So like I said earlier, it's instant payment. Unlike a contract where it could take weeks or months to invoice, we can pay on the spot. So it's an expedited payment method. I like to remind people that there is shorter lead times. It's not instant though. So there's a little bit of lead times. There's a little processing and planning that goes into it, but the amount of time it takes from sending out a solicitation or request for a quote to getting payment is definitely much quicker. There's fewer competition requirements. Again, this speeds up the process and allows us in a lot of ways to go out on the local economy. We do go into town at times and purchase what we need. So again, if I have any questions at the end, I'll be more than happy to answer those.
Good morning. I am Technical Sergeant Morris. I am also out of Ali Al Salim Air Base with the 386 Econs. I'm going to be walking us through the solicitation process and really what Captain Ingerson talked about a little bit more was how do you better propose to the U.S. government, especially when it comes to RFQs in particular. So we're going to go through that a little bit, moving into the pre-solicitation process. This is where we and definitely encourage taking pictures and pulling out your phones to get this information. At any point on the slide, I see some good some pictures being taken, so that's good. But this is the very beginning of our process when it comes to a requirement and really the government identifying a need that needs to be met. And that's why contracting exists, right? We want to go out and source particular needs from the local vendors or wherever we find our best suits for the place to source the need. And so this is the customer, and when it says customer, we're talking about a customer on the base typically. So we're talking about the different units that we support specifically. The requirement, and when it says the requirements package, what we're looking for and a lot of this isn't information that you're going to need for your proposal, but it's good to understand the beginning of our process. A lot of times we may solicit out into the local economy. We may solicit for bids for local vendors, and sometimes that solicitation can get completely scratched, and this is why. Sometimes the requirements package is not very clean, or sometimes the requirements or the details for that specific requirement or that specific need is not clear, and so a lot of times you'll see us re-solicit for maybe the same type of need And it's just important for you guys to understand that sometimes we may ask for more information, or we may resolicit because of a variety of reasons, specifically because of what we see on this slide here. So moving into what you guys are here for is specifically the solicitation process. So we're going to typically be doing RFQs. You see there, request for quote. The reason why is it's a little more streamlined, right? So we're looking for a need to be met that is met in an efficient and fast way, right? That's why a lot of times when you see a solicitation go out, it may not have a lot of detail. It may be an oral solicitation. That's something that we can do. And it may just be an email without a ton of detail, but we're looking for specific specs, or we're looking for a specific need to be met in reference to that quote that's sent out. You see RFP on there. You'll see that a little bit more with construction. We at the base operations support and service flight, we don't typically send out RFPs. We're looking, again, we're sourcing. You're going to see a materials list and kind of a needs list here in a moment, requirements list that we are typically looking for when we source out of our flight. But RFP is typically going to be a larger scale contract, right? It's going to be something with a higher dollar value, things like that. So, and then invitation for bid, very rarely in the contingency environment are you going to do invitation for bid. It's just not as expedient. That bottom part where it talks about the solicitation package will have clauses and provisions and things like that. Very important for you all to read that. We oftentimes find that contractors and vendors are not reading certain clauses or not reading certain solicitation details. They're just very fast to respond. And we want to encourage you to do a lot more digging into the solicitation, even with RFQs, because it's going to improve your bid quality. So we have the actual solicitation process here. This slide and the next slide is probably going to be, some of the next three slides are going to be some of the really important information for you. It's literally just a timeline here of what we do. Is we will send out the solicitation package, the ones that you all receive, usually, like I said, typically in an RFQ, and again, bigger dollar value items are going to be RFP, and it's just really going to come down to, did you meet everything that we were looking for in that specific solicitation? So you'll see in the next slide here. We typically will use a lowest price technically acceptable process. We're not going to typically do a trade-off process, and what that is trade-off is going to include a lot of non-cost or non-price factors. With lowest price technically acceptable is almost exactly how it sounds, right? We are looking for your best proposal price at the technical acceptable level. So did you meet the two questions we're looking for is, did you, for lowest price technically acceptable, the majority of the RFQs that come out from our office, did you meet technical specifications? And is your bid competitive? Do you have a competitive bid when it comes to pricing? And so those are two really big things, at least coming out of our office, that we're looking for when it comes to proposal requirements. Every so often we'll look for past performance if it's a contract that requires us to look at past performance, but that is actually relatively rare. We are looking for a technically acceptable lowest price proposal. So something to keep in mind. So this slide, really important here. Some of this information can seem very basic, but you will be shocked at how often we have to deem a proposal non-responsive or non-competitive because they didn't meet some of these criteria here. So first is read the evaluation criteria carefully. I've kind of talked about that a little bit, but I just strongly encourage you to slow down, because I know you want to sometimes be the first. I know a lot of vendors and a lot of contractors that when we get the proposals back, they want to be the first one to put their bid in. That does not matter. Feel free to take all the time you need, especially even up to the point of the solicitation closeout, to read the instructions carefully. Make sure you meet those specifications. Make sure you meet the specifications that's laid out in the evaluation criteria as well. The second one there, check your math. We have we have, I know for sure, we have gotten proposals that don't have the math correct, and we didn't have enough time to reach back out to the proposal, or to the person who proposed, the vendor who proposed, and then now that particular person is going to be deemed non-responsive because they didn't provide an accurate proposal. It wasn't a proposal that we found was reasonable for award, because of course if the math is not there, we're not going to do all the math for you, right? It needs to be very clear and laid out. Ask your questions early. So if you have any questions, you should be going through that proposal very early on in that period of time where you have to be able to respond to a proposal. And we're going to get back to you very fast. We take those questions very seriously. We want all of the individuals that we are sending the solicitation out to be competitive. So we're not going to shield and kind of like stiff arm those questions. We're going to welcome those questions, and we're going to send those answers out to all the vendors. Provide a professional, clear, and structured proposal. You'll be surprised at some of the proposals we get. Sometimes there's an example that we use in my office where we've gotten a photocopied proposal that has blurred numbers and text where we can barely make out exactly what the proposal has on there. And that was a vendor proposing to the government, expecting to get award. And obviously that's not clear, that's not professional, that's not structured, that's not something that, again, if that's the way you propose, then sure, go for it. But you're more than likely not going to get a government contract if it's not clear, structured, and professional, because if we can't make out the numbers and we can't read what's going on in that proposal, then obviously we're not going to be able to award to that vendor. And then that last part, just a little bit of your own maintenance when it comes to dealing with the government. So just your own kind of up to date registrations. So SAM and JCCS is what we look at. Those are very minimal and very basic maintenance that you can do for your business to ensure that you are qualified and meeting the very bare minimum to even do business with the United States government when it comes to DoD contracting. So award process, very basic, very simple here. 1 to 4 weeks is a really rough estimate. Sometimes it can take longer, depends on what the proposal is and what the requirement is. Sometimes it can be a lot faster, but 1 to 4 weeks is a pretty healthy expectation. And the information that a lot of people a lot of vendors are asking for, like, hey, did it get awarded? Did it get awarded? Feel free to do that, but we encourage you to kind of give us that 1 to 4 week window. Maybe I'd say really just to give us a month, because we get pinged quite a bit, and that fills up the inbox quite a bit to asking, did it get awarded? Did it get awarded? So give us that little bit of wiggle room, and then we'll be able to definitely answer be able to release the information about successful offers. And then, of course, debriefings are available, so feel free to ask for debriefings, how you could have improved your proposal, something like that. So we highly encourage that as well. That's something that vendors don't do enough, to be honest, so feel free to do that. And it's not frowned upon at all. We want to be able to help you and assist you at building better proposals and being able to compete better for a government contract. So we got a list of, just a very vague list here, but it's some of the more common things that we'll source coming out of the base operations support flight. Like I said, RFQs are usually going to go out for things like this. And again, request for quotes being the most common for these as well. Make sure you get a good picture of that org box at the bottom too. That's where most correspondence, if you don't have a direct POC, you should probably, just to be safe, keep that org box in the CC block the courtesy copy block when you're emailing proposals. And that is all I have. Thank you.
afternoon, everybody. My name is Staff Sergeant Anchetta. I am the current contracting officer for our infrastructure flight, along with 3 other KOs. I'm here to give you guys sort of the status of how construction is being done right now at Ali Al Salim Air Base. Currently, we have a MAC, which is the Multiple Award Construction Contract. I believe my Army counterpart is going to introduce you to something called the MATOC coming later this year, which is very similar in nature. But basically, we had competed this already in fiscal year 20, and at this time, we have these 5 vendors who are on that multiple award construction contract. So what that does for us, it sort of streamlines us to go to vendors that we need, considering the fact that construction projects can be a little more complex with the needs of the government. So at this time, unless it busts the 7 million mark for our estimates, or that we deem that it's not in the best interest of the government to pursue a requirement with these 5 contractors, we currently send fair opportunity procurement requests strictly for these 5. Once again, this is all to cover all construction at Ali Al Salim, as well down in Cargo City. For the time being, this one will expire in September 2025. So if you're interested in competing, I believe they're going to be recompeting this later down the road. At this time, we do have some active blanket purchase agreements on the base for basic items such as base paving, airfield paving, and demolition up to these dollar thresholds you see here on the screen. For these 3 right here, we do annual reviews for the price list on those. So if you are interested in possibly trying to be part of our blanket purchase agreements up to this point, you can send a capability statement to our org box down below. We can review it, do the price listing and stuff, and maybe you can find yourself on one of those BPAs. Currently this time, once again, this is sort of how we do business here for Ali Al Salim. It's just sort of try to streamline these things as we are coming and going. I have to reiterate once again, the org box at the bottom, for we are on rotations here, so probably by the time you guys get to your next vendor day, sometime in August, this will probably be a new face you guys see up here. So with that being said, some of the construction opportunities that we do have on base right now is going to be a lot of what you see here. So utility infrastructure. We do have a lot of like water, sewage treatments that do need doing. Our airfields get run down pretty quick, so we do have a lot of paving for those as well. Facility construction, repair, HVAC, sunshades, et cetera, et cetera. Once again, if you're interested in doing business, send me a capability statement. We'll look towards it. And really those 5 vendors that you saw on the MAC is going to be people you might want to connect yourself with. With that being said, just sort of to reiterate sort of Sergeant Morris's slide for a effective proposal. These are your different sites that you will go to ensure that your information is up to date so that you can continue to do business with the government. So your JCCS, your NCAGE code now, your unique entity identifier, and to ensure that you guys are registered through SAM, which I believe they do tutorials here as well for that. And if you need any assistance, you can go ahead and find yourself with these front service desks or these offices here. Over this time right now, once again, you must be registered in SAM, so renew every year. All the U.S. DoD agencies will check for active registration, so at the time we even consider you for a contract, we will most likely pull up your SAM to ensure that you're registered. If you don't have that at all, you can pretty much guarantee yourself you're not going to be in it. If we do have time up to the time of award to get that registered, but it is always good to just have that on the front end. So with that being said, that concludes the Air Force's side of the presentation. Do we have any questions? Yes, sir.
Your questions and answers for RFIs, is that on Prochnet or what system you use to submit your questions to?
So as far as the solicitation, sir, so typically with that, I know for infrastructure, when we send out our basically RFPs, or requests for proposals, we have instructions in there, and you'll just directly email the KO on that. Usually we have deadlines set up, and then that will be transmitted within our records to our respective folks.
And another one, within 3 days writing, is that an email? Is that the company letterhead attached to an email? Would consider in writing for request for debrief?
Request for debrief within 3 days, so almost.
Yeah, so that an email would work. The main thing is the timeline. Make sure you get in contact with us by those timelines.
Then your GPC purchasing payments, is that through KNET or the local banking system to be paid?
We just use U.S. banks. We come out with our actual government credit card, and however you process credit card payments, that's the source, and that's the manner in which we'll pay.
Yes, sir.
For GPC purchases for services and construction, are you only soliciting vendors that have base access?
Not necessarily. We put a lot of the market research on our customers, and we do have a vendor list. So if you're interested in being on a list, by all means, send us an email. We can definitely add you to it. Base access definitely helps. But right now, I think we process all the vendors on that list to ensure that they are on when it's time to come on and either perform the service or do construction work.
So you said for services, when you compete for service contracts, that's not in the. It's typically we're typically not going to put that in the solicitation criteria, in the evaluation criteria. So it would typically just be like I talked about, lowest price or past performance or something like that. So yeah, if you don't have access to the base for a service contract, you are fully still eligible to compete.
Yes, sir, in the back.
My question is more on the source selection. If the customer has already done the preliminary market research and provided everything to the contracting officer, to what extent or how much more does the contracting officer do in terms of adding or selecting other companies to also participate in the bidding when it comes out to a solicitation? And the second part to that question is, even if we submit the profile, there's only so many times we can submit the profile before it becomes harassment. So, is there any way to follow up on the RFQs, or is it just on a basis on what the contracting officer or which companies the contracting officer feels comfortable in selecting?
To answer your first question, you were asking in reference to the customer doing the market research and then giving it to us, and then us taking that information, building the solicitation, and then putting it out for bid. We don't have any. There's no undue influence of we're going to use this customer's quote, or we're going to use this customer's market research. We're just using that market research to justify what type of need it is, and then we are looking to make a very competitive bid to look for lowest price technically acceptable. So to be completely honest, the market research that the customer does should not factor almost any. It should factor very, very little, if any, into the solicitation process, because we want fair and open competition. We want to be able to compete with no undue like, hey, we got this quote from this person, from this vendor, so we're going to go to that vendor. That shouldn't happen, and that doesn't happen. That's something that we want a fair and competitive environment. And then the second question you're asking in reference to.
Along the lines of the source selection, on what basis are the companies chosen, or on what basis are the solicitations sent to RFQs for specific companies?
On what basis in reference to
Like, for example, let's say you have the market research for bunk beds, and
Sure.
it's all been submitted, and now you need bunk beds. So obviously by this room you'd be able to get maybe 70 quotations for bunk beds, but that's not what you need.
Right.
So on what basis are the companies selected, or on what basis are they invited to participate?
Sure. So it depends on the dollar value as well. And it also depends on how rapid we need how rapid the need needs to be met. So he was talking. Senior Master Sergeant Sweeter was talking about a little bit earlier about the SAM and how or the access to base and things like that. We are very exclusively using two methods right now. We're doing oral solicitation based on previous acquisition history. So if you do have previous acquisition history, that can make you more competitive based on how urgent the need is, right? So if we got bunk beds from you before, and we need them again, and it's an oral solicitation, based on that acquisition history, it's understandable that the U.S. government would be able to go back to that company and be able to source those bunk beds. But we use sam.gov. Can you pull it up one more for a second? Yeah, so that, yeah,
That's Sam
the
right here.
fourth bullet right there, being registered in SAM, that's going to be your most effective way to be able to compete for contracts. That's really,
So-
there's nothing else there
So to add
for
to that,
solicitation.
I'm hoping I'm stepping to, but to add to that, so sir, that's really where it comes to your responsibility as a vendor, right? When we do post solicitation on SAM, it's not in our best interest to restrict competition, right? Our job, if I get 70 quotes, that's even better. That means I get 70 people to prove that the price is fair, reasonable, and I'm good to go. With that being said, like I said, when we do post these things on SAM, it is a responsibility of the vendors to be hunting for those. And when you do see that requirement, then that's your opportunity to strike and actually submit for a bid. Typically for that type of stuff, like I said, we had those criteria that he has set for lowest price technically acceptable versus trade-off. So at that point in time, yes, the lowest price out of these 70 vendors in here is going to win it. And unfortunately, of the 70, only one can win. So 69 others will have to try again next time. But with the massive amount of requirements we do put on in SAM, that's going to be your hunting ground to look for your proposal or for things that you guys could bid on. And that's why it's very important that you guys are registered in SAM at all times because, any little slip up as far as you not being up to date or, once again, just clear and concise proposals, something you put in like, oh, I just found this requirement, but it's due tomorrow. We got to put something together now, and you rush it. And it comes to our office, and the numbers don't add up, things of that nature. That's what's going to cause your bid to not be as effective. So really staying on top of, once again, the hunting ground that is SAM, specifically for commodities and services, is going to be your focal point to doing business with us.
That's a good question, by the way. This is a good question. I like this. It's a good question.
Thank you. So on SAM, when we're searching solicitations, do we search like 386 Kuwait, or do we search a specific, what's the search parameters to look for those commodities?
Our DODAC, and that's what I would search by, is FA 5703. And that's going to be tied to the solicitation, and that will be very key specific to our installation. So the DODAC, again, is FA 5703.
So, quick question regarding SAM.
Sir.
So, if I'm a vendor and I register on SAM, right? And there's nothing on SAM that's related to what I'm trying to, pursue business with the government for, would I get email updates, or do I continuously need to log into the portal to check? Like, is there an update system where if you're registered on SAM, you'll receive
So typically, sir, if from my experience, no. That is why you would have someone whose goal is to be the hunter, right? Like, people get paid big bucks to go on there and look for stuff like that.
So basically not hire someone, but have someone dedicated to checking the website to see if there's any need for.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, this is another layer to it. That's why it's important when you register in SAM, make sure you identify with the NAICS code. So anytime there's something posted, they'll ping you automatically. And
Based on the NAICS code,
yes,
right?
so that's why it's important when you register in SAM, make sure you have the correct NAICS code. Because when they put an RFQ out or a solicitation out, automatically you get a ping for it.
So if I have like an NAICS code for education, I register on SAM, any educational needs would be directed to my email address?
That's a system issue.
That's something cool.
I highly recommend, if you can, register for multiple NAICS codes. Just because if the contracting officer decides to, because they are very similar in nature for some things, one will interpret one over the other. So having a wider range of codes available to you is going to open you up a lot more.
Yeah.
So talking about the NAICS code that you were telling about, so if you registered as a vendor in that specific area, so does it mean that you cannot participate in other requirement or solicitation? You are only in that industry. Like, for instance, if a transportation comes out, so you can just transfer, do that, not in the construction, not in the supply, just for clarification.
Ma'am, just to understand it, your question is, can you have multiple NAICS codes?
If you, for example, I am a transport provider, LTVs, yeah?
Sure.
So if I registered in SAM in that particular area, does it mean I am limited to bid in that area only?
No.
Or I can go and join any RFQs like supply of any items?
Correct. It's
stuff
really
like
incumbent
that?
upon the vendor to prove to the government that you fall within that NAICS code. So you can have multiple NAICS codes. You can provide a vast range of services, but you want to make sure that those NAICS codes are added into your SAM profile so you're notified of those opportunities.
Yeah, but that still doesn't help me out, because if I'm only concentrated, my business is particularly in transportation, and I feel I can supply bunk beds because I am, I have the capability, I have the financial, but I can't show my past performance with regards to that, which is also a requirement. So that does not make me.
Is your bunk bed NAICS code added to your SAM profile?
You can-
And then that's my question, is that you want to make sure that those NAICS codes are added to the profile so
Yeah,
that way.
I can just add that because it's just
Yep,
selection.
absolutely.
Yes.
So you would be qualified to do
I
that.
believe you
And
would,
that's-
based on your NAICS
Yeah,
codes.
because I have seen some companies awarded, like for example from UAE, being awarded with NTVs, and they're not even transportation companies.
Sure.
Sometimes they're even ceramic supplier. So it makes me wonder. There are ceramic, they're all for bathroom suppliers, but they're awarded with NTVs. So I am just asking, how do these companies, get awarded when they're not even, when they're not even really, their business is not really that transportation. This makes me wonder.
Sure. Great question. Without seeing it, I can't give you an honest, good answer on that. So I understand what you're saying, but I would make sure, for your sake, make sure those NAICS codes are added to your SAM profile.
Okay, so after that, say again? The transportation for 5 years. So it's something that needs to, that we can think about. How did it happen? If it's a fair competition.
And I would say if you have a question on that, email the contracting officer that awarded and ask for a debrief.
Sure. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
Sir, question now. Do you have any approved vendor list when you are procuring for building materials in Kuwait, or price is the only factor you go with?
For building materials.
You want just for a supply? For a supply contract. So we have vendors list based on previous acquisition history, but again, we use SAM very actively. So we're pushing. If there's a common theme today is SAM, or your SAM account or SAM.gov. So yes, vendors lists do exist based on previous acquisition history, but that's by no means our primary way of contracting, because again, vendors list does not afford us the opportunity to get the best price at the best technically acceptable specification. So yeah, we are always using SAM because we want to open it up for competition to get the best price. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Front row.
Thank you. My question is basically on lowest price technically accepted policy. How really do the end product of lowest price technically accepted prices affect the finishing product you, our clients, receive? I've had the privilege to work in various zones, places like Qatar and Kuwait, right now Dubai. It looks as if there are a kind of big pricing variation between Kuwait, Qatar, and Dubai. So really, that lowest price, technically accepted policy, personally, I'm thinking that it's affecting in a very good proportion the end product quality. Then my last question, is there any platform through which you guys compare price variations within these zones? Because I've been privileged to have some knowledge that Kuwait pricing is high. Now, what can you guys say on the finishing product you get from us, vendors in Kuwait?
So, great question, sir. So I want to take that lowest price technically acceptable, that terminology, and kind of flesh that out a little bit. It doesn't mean the cheapest. So that's first and foremost. Lowest price technically acceptable makes it sound like the government's looking for the cheapest price, but we're not. We're looking for, is it the lowest price that is technically acceptable, right? So that's something that is common, but it also doesn't mean the best quality. What lowest price technically acceptable means is when we take your quote or your proposal, and we take that and we give it to the technical expert. So typically, if it's building materials, we may give that to civil engineering on the base, and their technical expert will work through and identify if that meets all the specifications. It very well may be that it is not the highest quality out of all, and we wouldn't even know, right? Because we're not getting we're not getting the products from all the different vendors and being able to compare quality. But that, I think that gets does that answer a little bit of your question in reference to how does it affect us when it comes to quality? We are looking for, we do want quality, right? And that's why we go with the technically acceptable language. That's why the Federal Acquisition Regulation, FAR Part 13 and FAR Part 15 for proposals. If you go in there, you'll see some of that language in the source selection. It's a U.S. government regulation that we use. But does that help a little bit get after the question for your first one? So in your second one, you're talking about, do we take all the information that we get in reference to pricing and quotes and compare it? Is that the second question?
Not at all. I'm trying to see how we vendors in Kuwait, what do you think our performance criteria or ratio is as per other regions, like say Dubai, Qatar, to be precise. Yeah, it make it easy. Let's assume now to set up a fence, 100-meter price in Kuwait, the same fence, the same criteria, specification, set up in Dubai or Qatar.
It is all dependent on the scope of that specific solicitation. So every solicitation can be dramatically and is dramatically different from other ones. Right. But we also have to acknowledge that the location, for Aliyah Salim, it may be the same exact product, but the use on Aliyah Salim could be different from the use on Camp Rfqs. So.
Yes, sir, in the back.
Firstly, thank you. It's very clear, very similar to other RFPs and RFQs that we certainly deal with, so it's not something unfamiliar to us. But really my question is, and don't judge me for this because I was taking pictures and it's not about bunk beds. Can we have these slides? Can we have a copy of these slides? Can you share it?
Survey says yes.
That's it.
Is there?
So you mentioned that there are a few active BPAs under base operation services.
Yes, sir.
For participating in these BPAs, you are looking into MAC vendors and MATOC vendors, or you are taking new?
No, I'll take some new peoples. And that's so for the BPAs, those are evaluated annually. We have to review the price list every year, at which point in time we can always add vendors as needed. So if you are interested in being on one of the BPAs, if you send a capability statement to this org box, when the annual review comes up, we'll have everything compiled and we'll add you to the mix, and then or we'll look into adding you into the mix. We have to once again review the pricing and see where we're at from there.
And like, what's the review timeline? It's like the annual review when you say
the annual review. I don't want to give you a timeline that's unreasonable or unrealistic, because I personally, like I said, we do rotate a lot here. So whether it's in my time or my next rotation's time, I couldn't tell you how long. It's really based on the KO and how long it takes for them to determine that price. So.
So one question.
One moment, yes, sir.
How many
BPAs do you have awarded? How many vendors do you have under each BPA? Is it a few vendors?
Yes, sir. I think, I don't remember off the top of my head, I think we have about 2 or 3 per BPA right now. So there is room for growth there to sort of drum up some competition. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, talking about LPTA and competitiveness of a vendor, I have a question. See, normally you should be registered in SAM and JCCS, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now the statement of work, normally the instructions to offerers, you should have, take note of this. I am a new vendor registered in SAM. The instruction and the statement of work to the offerers, you should have to submit 1, 2, 3, 4, so and so. One of those is a past performance you have with the U.S. federal government, which I don't have because I am new. So does that make me less competitive?
So I would say that we do not hold that against contractors if they don't have past performance with the government. I think something you could do is you could bring up contracts with other entities. Something that's, I guess, would be a similar example of past performance that you've done, just to show the type of contracts you've worked on and the quality of the work. But if you do not have that experience, it's not held against you.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
I believe the gentleman in the back first. Yes, sir.
Sir, I have a question about DBA. Can I add that here or is it covered?
For DBA, is that something we cover right now, or is that a topic for another time?
Go ahead and ask the question. We'll see if we can answer it.
Well, I know Defense-Based Act is very important when bidding on these contracts. I'm asking, like, if the local insurance provider, if he covers all the aspects which they're done on DBA, on the American insurance, is it accepted, or do you need to get the American insurance DBA?
I don't think we have information on that right now, but if you get our email and send that question to us, we can do some research and dig into that for you.
Sure, thank you.
Okay.
And before we end, I do want to add one thing to the LPTA conversation. So, and Chad, do you mind going to the basis for award slide? So he brought up quality in a question on that. So I just wanted to explain kind of the government's mentality when it comes to our evaluation criterias. So in general, we're just doing commercial buys here in Kuwait. It's stuff that is very common that a lot of people can provide. So because of that, that's why we go to the LPTA as our evaluation criteria. The more complicated a purchase becomes, say construction, or the more specialized something is, that's when we start moving more towards a subjective trade-off, where we're more concerned with the technical capabilities as opposed to just the price, as long as it's technically acceptable. So when you see solicitations, that'll kind of provide you an understanding of why we're selecting certain evaluation criteria.
So with that being said, we're going to be available actually after. If you'd like to ask us some bonus questions, I do have to pass it on to my counterparts. So that's it for us. Once again, we'll be hanging around after this, so you guys can come around and ask questions at the table.
Yeah, I just have a question. When we sign a contract, typically with the government of Kuwait, they allocate a visa to the company, a certain manpower and a number. So does that happen with you guys or no?
I don't believe that's something that happens with us, sir. But once again, if you just ask us that question out when we get on the floor, I'll be able to sort of hunt that down a little bit better for you. So for now, I'm going to pass the ball to the Army. Thank y'all.
All right, hello. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll be covering the multi-award task order contract. I thought there was going to be a small break, but we're just going to jump into this. So this action is to be in addition to our sources sought and market research for our multi-award task order contract that's going to cover construction. I like to say listening to questions. They're very good questions. Please reserve the questions till after. I enjoy trying to answer those questions. And while the Air Force gave excellent answers, I might have additional details to similar questions too. So feel free to ask some of that. So my name is Sergeant First Class, Super Kit Ariat. I go by Kit. And this is our team. So we're the Regional Contracting Center for Kuwait. We primarily handle everything that happens here in Kuwait. We have other sister battalions that cover wider regions, but our focus here is here. We have Ms. Bickham, who is incognito somewhere in the audience. So I'll be the contracting officer for all the task orders that are under this MATOC. And we'll discuss a little bit more. We have the contract specialist, Randy Riley, and contract specialist, Staff Sergeant Anise Acosta. So we also have with us Major Sanchez from DPW, who's going to be our requiring activity. So they're the ones who bring us the requirement, and we're the contracting office that brings the contract to the streets or posts the solicitations and awards and reviews the proposals and do the negotiations. So in addition to that, we have you guys in the audience. Partnering with you guys, that's how we get work done within the organization. So we look forward to working with you guys. On the slide, you'll see the agenda, and I'll quickly have that up. However, we'll be covering everything in more detail. So what we're seeking is to provide sources, or to have sources to provide construction activities at installations and facilities in Kuwait. So what this covers for us is Camp Rfqs, Camp Bearing, and Udari Range. And we're using a contract vehicle known as an indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity IDIQ contract. So the term MATOC is specifically Army, something we do in the Army. Again, the Air Force used a different term, but we both organizations use the term IDIQ, or indefinite quantity. So for us, the multi-award contract allows us to have multiple vendors where we have a selected pool. Ultimately, the government is looking for best value and through competition. With our pool of selected vendors, we'll be able to provide competition amongst the pool to where we can award task orders to. What this is important to you is that for the next 5 years, the vendors that get selected to be in this pool will be the only vendors that we're soliciting construction contracts to. At this time, can I get a show of hands who's interested in doing construction? Is this the larger group? Okay. So this is very important to you guys to be on the MATOC. There's several other MATOCs that are around the organization. The Air Force has their own MATOC for construction, and then we also have an additional organization, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, that has a larger type IDIQ contract. Okay. Once you're selected to be on the MATOC, the government will be issuing out fixed price task orders for new construction, operations and maintenance, renovations, repairs, and other related support functions. So the current MATOC, as it stands right now, is our vehicle to award minor construction, generally valued below $2 million. We have currently on the MATOC 5 contractors. The maximum capacity for the MATOC is $49 million. Minimum guarantee is $2,000. So once you're selected to be a participant in the MATOC itself, there's guaranteed a minimum there for you. Each task order will also have a guaranteed minimum to be no lower than $2,000, and we will not be awarding task orders for more than $5 million during this time. So we originally had the original contract, or the previous contract that we're currently using. having auction years. Later on, we decided to modify it, and we ended up with a 5-year ordering period. So going forward, we're going to be using the same structure. Using the 5-year ordering period structure with no options. So on the second line there, you'll see the NICS code that we'll be using. So the NICS code is what we'll be putting our pre-solicitation notice under, and as well as the solicitation itself. So in your discussion about SAMs and SAM registration, you want to make sure that you are registered in SAM using that NICS code. When you are searching, you have your employee or whoever clerk looking for new actions. You'll be using that NICS code in the search to look for that action. Currently, our plan is to have 5 vendors for the new Make Talk. But having this vendor event and through our market research that we're doing now, we're open to see if there's more competition or more vendors that are capable to provide us. Ultimately, the goal is to have what would provide the best value to the government. Maybe more vendors would make the process cumbersome and not provide best value, but maybe having more vendors will have us provide better pricing. So that's part of our outreach here and part of our market research. The guarantee minimum is not determined. Again, we're going to look at, we're going to go back after this and complete our market research and determine the guarantee minimum. The per task order is going to stay the same, with $2,000 and $5 million being the maximum for each task order. And the peer performance, right now, this is just projected, but that is our goal, is to have the new MATOC be awarded and be in effect December 1st. So some of the contractors' responsibilities to be part of this. You must legally be able to do business in Kuwait. Then, as we've discussed in previous actions or previous conversations, SAMs and JCCS is very important. You must be registered in both of those websites. Once you're awarded a task, or once you've been selected as a participant of the MATOC itself, when you go through the solicitation phase of a new task order and been selected as the awardee, in addition to being registered in SAMs and JCCS, you'll also need DBA, or Defense Space Act, and PI access, or Procurement Integrity Enterprise Environment. That will be for your invoicing process, also known as Wide Area Workflow or WAF invoicing. And then we have SPOT, where you have to input your employee data. So going back to DBA, as is shown on the slide, the insurers have to be an approved provider on a list that the U.S. Department of Labor has provided. DBA is an act that's relative to our workman's comp back in the U.S., so it's regulated and part of an act that's covered by the U.S. Department of Labor. So going to the question previously about DBA, even if you had a vendor that's here that would sell DBA, it has to be, could be a middle person that is purchasing the DBA from a registered vendor who is authorized to provide DBA insurance through the Department of Labor. So it couldn't just be somebody who's not connected to the Department of Labor or not an approved vendor at all. If you go to the website, they have a list of all the vendors that are been approved through the Department of Labor. In addition to that information about DBA, also know that you will need DBA to get a notice to proceed. So you would not be able to proceed or start the work without DBA insurance. Okay, moving on to the next slide. So these were the evaluation factors that were evaluated last time, and we're looking to use the same type of evaluation factors. Each one of the evaluation factors subcategories under experience, management, technical approach, past performance, and financial capabilities has submittals. So you'll see there the construction experience overview sheet. That's going to be a submittal, so it's something that you would have to submit to us for us to evaluate. So if you want to start planning, you can look at those submittals. Addition to the past performance question, for this, no past performance is going to be evaluated as neutral. However, we're going to have a past performance questionnaire that you're going to have to fill out, and you would have to provide past performance. You could use previous projects that are non-governmental. It doesn't have to be a government project, but you would have to provide some form of past performance. Okay. In preparation, I do actually have the previous solicitation that was posted. You can ask me that if you want to know what the previous solicitation number is in the question and answers. So here's some of the projects that we've done. As you can see, some companies, some contractors have been awarded task orders more than others. Ultimately, what we evaluated at the time was that company provided the best value to the government. Okay. See some people taking pictures, so I'll give it a few more seconds.
Are these numbers for 1 year? Is that 1 year?
No, so this is the total current running.
Well, 10 to 12 year.
We're going to have Major Sanchez come up and discuss, but again, try to hold your questions to the end and address those. So here's some pictures of projects that have been completed. Currently, we have 2 projects at Camp Beering that's in the award phase and looking to close out. So we do have projects ongoing. We'll have additional projects at the end of this year, but it's important to be on the MATOC in the pool for us to award to. At this time, I'll turn it over to Major Sanchez to highlight some of the upcoming projects.
Morning, everyone, or afternoon. I'm not sure what time it is, but here we are anyways. As you can see up there, right at the very top, we have our substation hookups. We're trying to reconnect some buildings together and rewire a lot of stuff. And I guess some of the bigger stuff actually isn't on this list. In the last, me and my team, which right over there, starting with Captain Layler, Sergeant Young, Captain Lewis and Captain Edgerton, who are sitting over there. We'll be able to discuss with you guys further. I've been having these guys work really feverishly over the last 2 months as we got here on the ground. We have several projects in the works, 3 administration buildings to highlight of approximately 200 square meters each, and a company headquarters that we'll be planning in the next year. I know those aren't listed up here, but those are projects that are actually in the very last stages of being completed and being pushed through the process so that we can hopefully award it either later on in this year. So we have a lot of major construction projects that are going on, so we're going to require everybody from flat work guys, electricians, plumbers, HVAC. We'll need expertise in every single one bit of that, every bit of those fields. So I look very interested in meeting you guys. I actually come from a construction background back in the States. I'm the division president for residential home builder. So my background is in residential home building. I've been doing major construction projects with the United States Army for the last 15 years. So breadth of knowledge with that. And my guys, they all have their own bit of expertise in their own fields. I believe Captain Edgerton over there, he's actually aged about 2 years in the last 2 months. So he's working very feverishly to work on these projects. We actually look very forward to meeting all of you guys and discussing any of your questions that you do have, especially anything that involves in quality or performance like that. I want to hit on that just because it did strike something very key with me earlier. Just to answer anybody's question on that, while we do also, just like the Air Force, accept the lowest price with the technically acceptable thing, if you're awarded a project, one of the main things that are very key and dear to my heart, if we're at the very beginning, you're laying a slab, and obviously it appears to me that you have no clue what you're doing, I have no issue, and so do my guys have, with pulling the plug on that and having you either re-subcontract that out or ensuring that that project is done correctly. All right, we just want to make sure that when the government does get awarded or awards a contract, that what was promised is delivered. So we want to ensure that it is understood that our PMs are not just there signing pieces of paper. We're out there on the job inspecting these every single day, multiple times a day, to ensure that what the Army has, or in our case, the Army has awarded, is being delivered. So that's very near and dear to my heart, and I promise you, as long as I'm here, we're going to make sure we do that. But like I said, we have all these projects in the works, several more to go, and like I said, I think a little bit further along when we get to speak to you guys one-on-one, I'll be able to discuss the details on those specifically with you. I love to speak construction and talk construction, so I promise you I'll be here all day if that's the case, all right? Thanks.
So you're going to take a picture of this slide. This is our projected projects. Again, at this time, we don't have funding for this, so this is just projected. So we'll have, this might not be all, and it might not also be, there might be more, or there might be less, depending on funding on the government side. And then last slide, 2027 projects. Again, you see the variety covers a lot of different types of actions. So here's our current timeline. We posted the source of SOT. Source of SOT is out there on sam.gov. Posted on the 25th of February. We're doing this AmCham event now. Our projected posting of the synopsis or pre-solicitation notice is going to be late June, with the solicitation actually dropping in July. So the current contract ends November 28th, and we have this projected to be awarded shortly following that to cover the time period. Again, this is projected. This is subject to change as we move forward in the process. But ultimately, we will need this vehicle to do construction going forward for the next 5 years. So up here is our inbox that you can email it to. In addition to this, we have handouts that we have outside, pamphlets or booklets that we've made. Some of you already have some in your hands, I noticed. So that information is also there. As we change out, as the military rotates, we might, even if you got our information now, it might not stay the same. I got here in January, and I'll be departing in November timeframe. So just be aware that the best way to contact us and best way to keep in touch is through the mailbox, because the mailbox is going to always be here. So before I open it up for questions, I'd like to state that if you could start your questions with if this is a general question or if this is strictly may talk. We can try to work out the general questions as well. Again, our contracting office covers a wide variety of other actions as well. Even though the presentation is focused on MATOC, I know that to provide a good service to you guys as we're out here, we want to try to get as many questions answered as possible. So, yes.
Sir, all those projected projects, will they be awarded to SAMs, or is there a way that if there are some contractors who are already doing some work on the base, you will be awarding them without posting them on SAMs?
So, yes. Once we have the MATOC, if we have 5 vendors or 6 vendors, however many we have on the MATOC, on the IDIQ action, those 5 will be the only 5 that we solicit to. So they will not be posted to SAM. They will be directly emailed or whatever mechanism we use to contact those specific 5. So that is the pool that becomes who we solicit to. They will not be posted to SAM. Yes.
Is the spot registration mandatory for MATOC contracts?
Is the spot registration mandatory for what?
MATOC?
MATOC. So for the MATOC itself, registration is recommended, but you will not have to input data for your employees until you have been awarded the actual task order. So you can register in spot now, and that will assist you in getting actions later to be cleared of that. But the data for your employees is action specific, meaning the task order. Yeah. Other questions? Oh, yes.
So the value which you mentioned, the upper value of $49 million, so the coming MATOC will have a $49 million cap.
Yes, so I can go back to that slide. The capacity for this is 35 million. So we determined that ultimately we didn't get anywhere close to the 49 million. But so we're looking at 35 being the maximum capacity of the MATOC. However, again, we're not in solicitation phase right now, so it could change. Ultimately, what the maximum capacity does for us is allow us flexibility within that range to go up or go down, but it has to be established at the solicitation phase and on the award. Yes. Gentleman in the back.
Just a question about the DBA. In the slide of the DBA, it's mentioned that actual cost is reimbursable. So is it reimbursable on top of the contract value, or it will be part of the contract value?
So the DBA is part of the entire contract costs. However, the DBA price is not evaluated. So as part of the evaluation for price. So let's say your DBA, your insurance provider gave you insurance for $10,000. Somebody else gave their insurance for $4,000. That price, the $4,000 and $10,000, is not evaluated to see who had the lower or who had the better bid. It is a cost reimbursable. So once you pay that insurance, it is then you can submit an invoice saying that you paid it, provide evidence, and then we would reimburse you for that amount. It is going to add to the total amount of the action because we have to record that, hey, we're paying for $10,000 or $4,000 of DBA, but it's not evaluated as far as who's going to be better, who's going to be best value for the government.
Okay, so if my contract sum on the value is, let's say $1 million, and I paid $100,000 for DBA, you will give me the $100,000 part of the $1 million or on top of the $1 million? Or additional extra over the $1 million?
It would be part of the total. Does that answer it? Okay. The gentleman in the coat.
After the award, based on what some companies are more task orders more than some other.
It just based on best value at the time. Specifically from what I've known is that the one that was awarded 9 task orders versus the one who was awarded only 1 task order, I can say that the price difference, one was heavily overpriced or much higher price than the one that was awarded more of the task orders. Yeah, price was a big factor in those evaluations. This gentleman first.
Yeah, my question has to do with payment bond. Is it applicable in this matter?
No, currently we're not using payments or performance bonds on the MATOC. However, I think we added some verbiage to leave room for flexibility. Again, we're not completely there with the solicitation itself, but payments and performance bonds aren't being used. Yes, gentleman in the back.
I'm still trying to figure out how to word this. So, in terms of defining the MATOC, again, this is just misinformation or information. Are these projects considered U.S. government projects on post, or is the end user / final customer Ministry of Defense or the Kuwait government?
They're all U.S. Army.
Okay, because the next question was, when it comes to the construction, on government contracts, construction companies are rated categories in terms of what type size jobs they can legally do with the Kuwait government. The private sector is a different one. So are we following private sector, or are we following U.S. government CTC sector?
I think the best way to answer that is that you have to be able to do business in Kuwait. So whatever your registration is in Kuwait has to also apply. I can look around and yeah, that's the correct. Yeah. So yeah. Okay. Does that clear? Is that?
It's just clear because when you're saying construction company versus, private companies can do contracting up to certain things, but if they try to do that on a government level, they need to be qualified or they need to pass a different type of, for the larger size projects. So if you're talking 3 million, 5 million, they're all categorized.
Right. It's whatever the Kuwaiti government has authorized your company to do plays a factor.
Our CTC category, along with any technicals that we do in the MATOC, for example, will that add weight to the proposals?
I think you may want to clarify that a little bit more because I'm not sure. You don't seem to be aware of the CTC regulation.
I'm not. I'm looking.
Construction companies into 4 different categories.
Okay.
And it depends on the capital, paid-up capital, as well as the size of the job that they can take. Right? So if you're category 4, you cannot take, for example, what is it, 10 million KD projects? Yeah. So this is how they're categorized. So he's asking, do these criteria apply to U.S.?
So I'll say this: the maximum task order is $5 million, right? So to be able to do a $5 million task order, you're going to have to, whatever registration category that requires you, you're going to have to be able to do that.
Okay. So it can be anything.
So we should submit our category along with our technical proposals, our CTC. Okay, we appreciate that.
All right. Yes, sir.
So in the review process, you have mentioned a financial capability
Yes.
portion. So what is the benchmark or a criteria that how you review the financial capability?
Yeah, so the financial capabilities is several parts. So it's your ability to do jobs and the capacity. Maybe if we had one of the questions I'm going to ask later in the outside table event is, are you going to be able to do multiple jobs at once? Let's say if there's maybe 2 or 3 going on projects ongoing, would you be able to handle that? But the other part is something that we're looking into. So on the previous solicitation, they use a seed contract or a seed task order to evaluate price. So ultimately, to select, we have to also value some type of dollar value to determine fair reasonableness. What we're looking at now is creating a table that roughly covers major projects for us, so that it'll be a table that you guys fill out. Maybe it's like fencing, how much you guys think you would charge for fencing through that time, whether it's in yards or whatever. That those dollar values will be what we determine as financial capability statement, and we'll evaluate for price at that time. But again, that's projected and not exact. Again, please look for the actual solicitation when it drops. We'll have all that information worked out exactly on how we're going to evaluate for fair and reasonable price.
On the slide general evaluation, you mentioned base access is one of the factors.
Yes.
So does that mean if today you have a new contractor that is approved, do you give them access? Do you give access? Do you facilitate access to the base?
Yes. So that's something that we worked with before, is that technically each awardee of the MATOC will have a contract with the government because there's a minimum guaranteed amount. So there would be some general potential for badging or base access, but we're looking more into that information to be clear. But definitely for each project, each task order, you definitely have base access for your team to do the work. But we're looking to see what type of general base access we can grant with just being a general contractor on the base.
Real quick, just to answer that a little bit, that can be a major issue once you're awarded a project, base access. Captain Layler, who deals with that pretty much on a daily basis, can discuss with you in detail on that a little bit later. Those requirements do change from time to time. Unfortunately, that is the reality of the situation that we live in. And I do realize that a lot of these, especially in construction, some of these positions, you guys subcontract to individuals from other nationalities, and based off of where they originate from, they may or may not have more stringent requirements for them to be able to have base access. I think that's something during your actual site visit to our location is something you should probably ask at that time for that individual project, because that's more close to when you would get to bid on that project or be able to get awarded that project. So when you do the actual site assessment, once you get on the MATOC list and hey, you're coming to go check out whatever project, that is something you want to ask the project manager who will be on site at that time those specific questions. All right. So I like you said, that's a very difficult question to answer, but yes, there will be a requirement for you as the contractor to get your individuals badged. We as the PMs on Camp Buren, for example, will assist you in that process. But what we can't guarantee, especially at the state of the game, is that we're going to be able to be essentially the individuals to let you on in and provide chaperones or whatever for the duration of the construction project. We'd like to be able to do that. Unfortunately, we just don't have those resources at the moment.
Fair enough. Just follow-up question, which might be a little bit harder. Do you have a banned list of countries for supply materials?
Like a blacklisted list of countries? Oh, ban list. Okay.
I think we definitely want to talk to Captain Layler afterwards. Yeah. He'll be able to discuss with you a little further. There are some that are a little more difficult than others that we've had issues with, but I don't think we've denied anyone specific access yet at this point. But there are some that are a little more difficult than others.
About material supply. So, for example, light bulb, if it's made somewhere.
I got you.
So we do have. What's referred to as the 889 currently, which is for telework, or not telework, but telecommunications devices. It has a list of companies that are banned from us using. There's several clauses that cover like Kaspersky, internet, or not internet, but computer security. But I'm not aware of any current ban of supplies from.
I would say the issue where you would have issues with any supplies to deliver, we've had issues in the past with electrical requirements where they have to meet, especially if we're going to be using U.S. service members in this situation to be housing or using it, they'll have to pass the ULC code, for example, for anything that's electrical. Sometimes you have to purchase those items back in the States or wherever it is so that we ensure that they meet our requirements specifically. So you want to look at that when you actually get the statement of work to review that, whether that requirement is in there or not.
Yeah, we do, again, check for goods, check for quality of things. To give an example, when I was in a different country, but it was Afghanistan, and we had to lay network cables we actually opened up the network cable boxes and went through all the wiring to ensure that it was the quality that we required to go into the installation process that we were doing. So yeah, we did check for quality, but not exactly the location.
You have 5 contractors, and in their project sometimes they hire subcontractors. Are they, or they should be pre-approved by you, the subcontractor, or after they sign agreement with the contractor?
We just have the contract with the prime, the prime contractor. The subcontracting is up to the contractor that we awarded it to.
I'm sorry.
Oh, there's a person this way. In the back. Okay. Yes. Sorry.
If you've already answered this, when does the MATOC registration close? And then would I be right in thinking that that's it for 5 years? Because I've seen on the timeline opened again in December.
Yes. So that is the right understanding, is that once the selection is made, I'll go to this slide where I might have you guys. Yes. So proposals would be due roughly in late August after the solicitation is posted in mid-July. And after the selection is made, after the main topic is awarded, whatever 5 we have is the 5 we're going to use for the next 5 years.
Okay.
Or whatever the number is, what the total number is. But
registration for it comes after the proposals. Is that what you're saying?
Registration for.
So when we submit like our financial capabilities,
yes, during the solicitation phase, is when you're going to submit all of those documents for submittals to be reviewed, and then we're going to evaluate those documents, and then we're going to do selection. And
thank you.
Was that?
Yes.
Excuse me, let's keep the sidebar conversations down. You might want to hear the points that are being addressed.
Yes, sir.
Sorry, if I may take you back to badging issue.
Okay.
There is this experience we're having right now in accessing the bids, where somebody has a project and a notice to proceed is given and he is not badging, or he's not badged enough number one. He submits the list of his workers and it takes 4 months. Is there any way this method system is considering to give badging capability to the selected contractors? So BE5, whatever.
So I can speak to that a little bit. So when a project gets sent up to us for us to review you guys' proposals, at that point we will identify which project manager is going to be handed this project once it's taken care of. Once that is done and we have and that contract is awarded, that PM will reach out to that individual, to that contractor, whoever it is. Well, they'll make that connection, and that's one of the prime things that I have directed my team to do, is to make sure that we get that list of individuals, because yes, it can take time for us to process all those people. And we understand that's actually one of the limiting factors that we can't eliminate in construction, right? You got to have people to build these projects, right? Like, they're not going to build themselves. So what we need is a complete list with everyone's details and pertinent information, so when we actually schedule a date for you guys to come in, that everybody is there, they're all lined up, they have all their documents with them so that they can get processed, and we can have that a quick and smooth process. So that, I guess that's the best way to answer it. I don't know what your experience has been in the past, but we need that complete list, and everyone needs to have all their documents.
I'll follow up with additional detail on that. So the task order, once you've been awarded the task order, that's what's going to be the document that gives you access to the installation, right? So immediately as it's awarded, or even before it's awarded, you're planning your team or imagining, hey, here's the team that we're going to have out there. As soon as over, hey, here's the list. We got you, we've been awarded this action, we're going to work on our DBA, and you start working on our packet of employees to get base access. I am aware that DBIDs and all these other systems to get installation access takes time, but in that like 14 days or however many days you get used to get DBA and whatever other documents and submittals you have to submit to start the notice, to get the notice to proceed, would also be a good time for us on our side to work on the badging process.
You see, my question actually is based on recent happening in the base, where it looks as if CST, that's the PMO department, has the approval power to let you in or out. Now, in some ongoing projects right now in ABCK, there is this conflict between PMO department or DB, the authorizing department, with schedules of projects. Like I said before, you've been awarded a project, you turn in your list of people after doing the DBA, all the financial and insurance stuffs, but when you apply now to get badge, you'll be told this badge is going to be ready 3 months.
I mean, it's not exactly our office, but we can definitely take that information back and see if we can improve. Ultimately, from our contractor office, we understand the importance of working with contractors, and you are providing us the great service that you're providing us, and that's what we're trying to meet our needs, the government needs.
So
yeah,
if
we'll
I may
take that
suggest
information
something,
back.
sir, if you don't mind, when you select the 5 or 6 companies you intend to use for the 5 years, is there any way you can work out an arrangement with PMO, CST department, so that you will have a kind of a range of periods to work, especially when you have a project that needs an instant?
We can take that information into consideration for sure. I think that's a good recommendation. But no guarantees, as once I transition out, there's no telling what the previous or the following on people will do. And I can't speak for the other offices that do badging, but I appreciate your recommendation.
Just to add on that, can we badge up an initial team, at least key personnel, based on the master NATOP award rather than individual task order?
Yes, so that's something that, like I said, that we're going to look into, because I understand the need to, when we do site visits, it would help us if there's already 2 people on your team that has access or whatever. It might not be a whole, we might not be able to give access to all 50 employees you might have, but maybe 2 or 3 people that can continuously get on base so that we can do site visits or we can communicate in that manner. I think that's something that we can definitely look into.
Sorry to interrupt. I think we are on the time.
Okay, sure.
So now vendors who were selected construction companies, you got an email and you probably got a WhatsApp as well. So your table is outside. You can start setting up now. This both will take a break for 30 minutes, so until 1 p.m. And then at 1, we're going to start the selected construction companies showcase. If you weren't invited, then please ask questions to whoever is available, and then we ask you to head out because it is an internal showcase.